This is The Translator Without Talent by Ryan Holmberg. Ryan Holmberg is quite a prolific translator and historian of manga, specifically Gekiga, alternative manga, that side of things. And this book is comprised of 2 years' worth of his Instagram posts from 2017 to 2019, when he was based at the University of Tokyo and working on a number of translation projects. This is really interesting to me personally because I've read a lot of the books that he is talking about, the books that he's worked on. So it's just really great to have more insight into the process of translating those books and bringing them to an English-speaking audience. It's really fascinating to see the amount of thought that goes into the translation process. I read a lot of manga broadly, not just on the Gekiga side of things. And I read a lot of translated fiction, and obviously I'm monolingual. I can't read the original language these books are written in, but I do think sometimes when I read the English translation, I think that there's something not quite right about it, or it feels a bit clunky, or I feel like maybe there was another way they could have translated that to make it seem more natural. And there's a lot of talk about that in here. There's a lot of talk about specifically sound effects and how to translate a Japanese sound effect into an English sound effect without fundamentally changing the impact of the scene or the mood of the scene. And Holmberg is very honest about how sometimes he doesn't succeed in doing that, not just with sound effects, but with translation generally. He doesn't succeed in translating it in a way that is as impactful as it was originally, or that works in the best way. And I think that's really interesting. There's quite a long essay in the introduction of the book where he goes into more detail about that. And I think it's really interesting to see that process, and not just the process of translation itself, but the process of the amount of research. And it's really, really clear when you read those books and you read the essays that he writes to accompany those books that an excruciating amount of research has gone into them. But it is amazing to see that in full in this book, all in one place. Obviously he's not just looking into historical context so that he can translate things more accurately. He's also looking into historical context to explain why this manga was written in this way, or what impact this had on the culture, or what the response was to it at the time. He even talks about Pachinko by Min Jin Lee and how he was pulled out of it a little bit because it was historically inaccurate when it came to its representation of manga, which I found so fascinating. I would say I read this book not in one go, but pretty close together, and I would say it's quite dense to do that way. It might be better to read it bit by bit and sort of put it down and come back to it. It is quite chunky. It's over 400 pages, or it might just be about 400 pages now that I've said that. It's about 400 pages. But if you are interested in manga, in the translation of manga, or even just like the history of what he's talking about, everything from discrimination of different groups in Japan to nuclear power and the protests against that. This is a really interesting, almost historical document to have about so many different things. And I'm really, really glad this book exists. I love the manga that he translates. I get very excited whenever I see that he's the person who's translated a book. So I'm really, really happy to have this. I'm really glad to have it in my collection, and it's a great companion piece to those books that I already have on my shelf. So yeah, that's The Translator Without Talent by Ryan Holmberg, and I really, really recommend it.